We are going now to go to Ralph. Ralph is a member of our community. You know him as ATAK Release, and the name is justified by the fact that probably without Ralph, we will not have any type of ATAK that is released in the wild. So Ralph, I'm going to make you as a presenter, if I can find you. Where are you? Here you go. Go on, Ralph.
Okay. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for sharing a part of your Saturday with us. I'm super excited to have an opportunity to talk about a released ATAK and have an ecosystem in the public that takes all of the government funded work that we've done and makes it available to the public who paid for it. But I want to start off by thanking first Tim, whose vision in his position really allowed Josh and Chris and Charlie to make this happen. Without Tim's and their leadership, we could never have done this. While Josh used to work for me a long time ago, I really work for Josh now as the ATAK Evangelist and sometime jailhouse lawyer for the team. Excuse me. So I want to talk today about the government's responsibility to do technology transfer and what that means, and what makes TAK special, and why we should distribute it widely. I've done tech transfer for a lot of different technologies, and I used to work on a program about 15 years ago that had 7 different programs to do PC-based situational awareness for special operations across the DoD, as well as some conventional forces. And all of them wanted to be, we all agreed we should have one standard. And every group thought that theirs should be the standard. So we were all spending money on duplicative work. And when we decided to do TAK between 2003 and 2009, when we really got going on it, we wanted to do things differently. And so ATAK was actually started as a demonstration of what TAKServer could do. And Josh was running that program at the time. And because we know that, as our current Air Force Chief of Staff of the Air Force likes to say, culture eats strategy for breakfast, we wanted to use ATAK as a model for government open source, so we didn't have 7 identical programs competing for resources that were duplicative to do the same maintenance and incompatible training and incompatible bug patches. And so the distribution model we have wanted for several years was to follow the White House's distribution of software as open source in the government wherever we could. And when we can't make it open source, to have it be government open source. Recognizing as the Air Force that this software doesn't belong to just the Air Force and doesn't belong just to the contractor, but it belongs to the entire government. And there's a bunch of legal stuff at the bottom. And so making the source code available to the whole government got one program after another to say, you know, this ATAK thing is the way to go because it reduces the cost and we can all contribute as we wish. But then also, in addition to the government open source model, we had all the stuff we learned about how monopolies work in the tech world. You know, Android and Microsoft and Facebook, Apple are essentially natural monopolies in the tech world. And they did that because they were first to market, inexpensive, widely distributed, and extensible. And that led each of them to be.
Sorry to interrupt, Ralph. If you are sharing any presentation,
I'm
I don't
sorry.
think that we can see that. And we cannot see also your video. We see only a black screen.
You
So
no longer see my video.
No. So can you stop and then start again your
yes,
video?
I will go back.
Yeah, now we can see the presentation. You can go on. Thank you.
Good. I don't know what happened. I'm struggling to go back. There we go. Okay, so we started this as a demonstration of what TAKServer could do when Josh was running the program. And, oh, one too far. There we go. Okay, and we wanted to make it as open as possible because the source code the government develops belongs to the government, and there's a requirement for the government to share with the public whatever it can. And we know that if you want to make a monopoly in the government, to get it widely distributed, you'd like to be first to market, inexpensive, widely distributed, and extensible. And also, you'd like it to be sticky. That is, once people learn it, they have an incentive to stay learning it. And that formula leads to market dominance in the FANGs, Facebook, Apple, Android, Netflix, and Google, as well as Microsoft, let's not forget. And we thought we could do the same thing in the government because it would be way cheaper in the long run if we could do it, although there's a bunch of mechanisms in the government that make that hard. And so the question is this ATAK capability a capability we could get out to the world as well? And it's inherently a dual use capability. And you can see that, as Tim alluded to, there are a dozen other applications that do more or less what TAK does. We're not magic because we're dots on a map on a phone. And also, if you look at what those capabilities are that the military needs so much, the dots on a map are critical, but they're not really military specific capabilities. So it was possible for us to move from a pure military program and tech transition that into the wider community that could use it. Also, it turns out end users don't really care about servers, but they're really important. Okay, so why transfer TAK to fire departments and smoke jumpers and police departments and people doing inventories? Because the law requires it. There's a law that says if you have technology that the government's developed, it should be transferred via some mechanism to the public so that they can benefit from that. Our TAK model is consistent with the White House guidance on open sourcing software. I'm sorry, I've already done that. Okay. So the government has to do this. The word shall there in red. We have to transfer this technology wherever possible. And again, Josh and Tim in particular really have carried that ball for us in a way that just could not be done just within the lab. So,
Ralph, sorry to interrupt. If you are switching slides, I don't think that we can get it. We still see the slide, what makes TAK special.
good, I just switched to that slide. So,
okay.
So that's where we want to be. So the first thing that made TAK special, and you see I have it in green because in the past there have been numerous groups within the DoD who thought because TAK brought them so much capability, it was special and shouldn't be widely distributed. But as I described with tech transfer, it fits everything that says we should transfer it. Excuse me. And We were at the right place at the right time because we came along just as convergent devices and IP-enabled radios hit the commercial as well as the military markets. Without those persistent system radios coming on the scene and the Harris radios in 2012, there's not much way to communicate on the battlefield, and it's much less valuable. But it's the smartphones and those radios that are special, not TAK in particular. We also had a bunch of researchers ready to exploit that technology because labs got a bunch of smart people, and they pay a bunch of smart people like BBN and Raytheon and PAR who have done that work. We also had the world's best trained users to provide us with extensive feedback, as Tim alluded to. And we focused on a great user design for the interface to make it as easy to use as we could because we knew that was important. The extensible API lets everybody use TAK for the things they need without all the stuff they don't. We have, I don't know, 100 or 200 maybe plugins in development in various stages. And that allows everybody to have that phone plus radio do what they need to do, maybe intersect with their Internet of Things. And if you look at the cost, if you think about getting everybody on the same user base, if it costs $1,000 to train each user, which I think is a lowball, if we have 250,000 users now, that means that other organizations have paid $250 million in training to make the system right. And let me give you the parallel with Microsoft. The government and most people use Microsoft not because it's the best, but it's because it's what they know. And so now you have interoperability and training, which drives people to make the product better. And that's why TAK is the standard for the government combined with the open source, the government open source. And it's why we'd like the public to use it as well. It's special because it allows coordination over geography, and it allows us to communicate in ways that we couldn't before. I saw a video in 2017 on the History Channel where they were interviewing the New York City Police Department. And they were talking about how the key was to, quote, communicate, communicate, communicate. And they had ATAK running in the background. So these capabilities aren't special because of the software. They're special because they allow collaboration and we make them widely available. And so making them widely available to the public is the next logical step. I hope you're mostly familiar with Metcalfe's law, but it's an old telephone argument that says a device is useful in proportion to the square of the number of connected users. That's why Facebook took off. It's why Android took off. And if we get ATAK in the hands of the public and have them learning it so that when police departments need to work with the FBI, for instance, or with, for instance, AFSOC when they're doing hurricane relief, it makes everybody more capable and it makes a better bang for the buck for what the government has paid for and what the public gets to use. And that's why we need to distribute widely. Excuse me. And open source goes even farther, as Tim said, and Jason will hit that a little bit in his presentation too. Having it in the Play Store makes it super easy for the public to get it, but it also makes it super easy for organizations like police departments and firefighters and other organizations that use device managers to load their apps. It makes it easier for them to manage it without having to do a mother may I to the tax center because Charlie Johnson doesn't scale. If he's got 1,000 people asking him for stuff, he has a hard time doing it. But having them just go to the Play Store makes this work way, way better. So federal and other interoperation is easy. The federal government may, for instance, for something they need to do, have tax servers set up ahead of time and just hand out the encryption code to connect to the server, and in a few minutes, that police department that they need to work with suddenly can interoperate. Gives us an ecosystem of trained users, integrators, and vendors. And Tim didn't talk about this, but having more people know how to use your stuff makes the whole ecosystem more valuable yet again. That ecosystem of contractors that support the government and also supports industry and commercial makes it better for industry and commercial. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with AeroNet, but the AeroNet program is looking to sell systems to other nations for surveillance and domestic emergency use. And they use ATAK because it's unclassified, it's easy to use, it's easily available. Having ATAK in the Play Store actually makes AeroNet more valuable because it's easier for those people to get trained up and work with the US military when they need to. And it also makes additional products like Gotenna, for instance, and a dozen others I could name, that sells to domestic uses with ATAK, but now could also sell to those AeroNet partners if they choose to. And now we have one system rather than 7, reduces those training costs, increases quality, increases interoperability. This approach of wide distribution, including now open sourcing and Play Store, has led directly to wider distribution for the government and lower costs for the government.
Some users are wondering if you are changing slides, because we can see the time of your desktop that is frozen since 10 minutes.
Well, that is terrible. I see that my show screen went off for some reason.
Now we can see that
and so I hit it back on. Let me check my time because we need to. The trains need to move on time here.
You're still fine with the time because we are earlier with other presentations.
Okay.
So please go on.
All right. So the wide exposure pushes additional users with additional training. There are people who have come back from using ATAK and special operations into police departments and brought it with them. And now we have people in police departments beginning to join the military and interoperate with them and show that it's valuable in both directions. So having this in the Play Store actually trains people, which benefits the government in multiple ways. Additional training, additional users interoperating is also super valuable. The 2016 inauguration, which had many federal organizations interoperating using TAK for security at the event, is an example of the sort of interoperability that the government could really not dream of 5 years ago. And that expertise in development, administration, and vendor use makes it easy to reuse the work that we've done. I did this slide as part of the first public presentation I did for why we need to open source and license ATAK in 2014. And somebody put it on Wikipedia. And this is the same slide. It turns out in the federal government, you're not allowed to talk about actual other agencies. I'm not even allowed to refer to the product center. in my written briefing, or I can't get it publicly released, let alone other governments. But getting ATAK out there makes it easier for other special operations groups, other armies, and other civil defense forces to use ATAK. And we have all of those cases already. We have the Forest Service and FEMA's and DHS's using it, both in the United States and elsewhere. You have SWAT teams and security teams using ATAK, sheriffs and police, and even private security staff, because knowing where the dots on the map are is key. One of my kids actually has used ATAK for 2 Eagle Scout projects now. And, you know, when my kids and I are out and about hiking, we use ATAK to keep track of each other when we're separated. So enabling our international partners to easily get ATAK makes it easier for the AeroNet community, all of our international partners we want to be interoperable with, and our civilian partners. And open sourcing it and putting it in the Play Store is the next natural step. I'll stop and take questions. And I apologize for the screen freezes.
Sure. So we have several questions here, Ralph. One of the first question was in regard to, you mentioned IP-enabled tactical radios, and we understand stuff like PRC 15.2A and PRC 16.3S that have, you know, a lot of capabilities. And do you foresee any civilian radios being released that recreate similar capabilities?
Well, civilian radios in that regard led the way. I would point to Persistent Systems and Trellisware and Silvus radios as really civilian but expensive IP radios. But in fact, also remember, your phone is really an IP radio. It just goes to the cell towers, but it's an IP-enabled radio. So those radios are expensive and they're getting cheaper. And in 10 years, you're going to be able to buy those the way you can go buy a one of those FANG radios that you'll hear about later today. But make no mistake, there are many relatively expensive civilian radios that are available today for use if you have $5,000 for a radio. Over.
Okay, thank you. I have another question from Enrique Gonzalez in the question list. So I have installed TAK, and now you have that from the Play Store. Can I expect to get automatic update from the Play Store?
Yes, that is the plan. Although, remember, I'm just the evangelist. Josh is in charge. Yes is the answer to that question.
Okay. So, and final question is, a user in Discord asked if we are going to see the capability to do route planning like in Google Maps into ATAK.
I'm sorry, I missed a key word there. Route deployment?
Route planning, so that I can
route planning.
Route planning, sorry.
That is a plugin which is available to state and local federal people now and is pretty good. You'll ask Josh whether that's when Tim referred to the fact that we're looking to make those civilian plugins more widely available. And I believe that that is on Josh's and Charlie's list, but I don't think we can give a date for when that's going to happen. I certainly would like to see that happen, and I see no reason why it shouldn't happen. I think the government is working towards that, but they probably don't have a timeline because government bureaucracies are hard. I can't even explain how hard it really is sometimes. Over.
Okay, so thank you so much for your illustration of how is that we went where we are, and especially Ralph, I would like to personally thank you in this occasion for the support that you have provided to me as a kind of newbie in this world and helping me out to understand how to make the right steps in the right directions, and like you have done with me, with many other in this community. So thank you again, Ralph, for being there with us and helping us also to organize this conference today. And
you're welcome.
So go on, please.
You're welcomed. And again, thank you to everybody for coming. And I look forward to your help in making ATAK the tool of choice for collaborative geospatial operations in the civilian world. All right, I'm out.
Great, thank you. And currently we have 186 people connected. That is kind of amazing.